Welcome back, everybody. The program that I was using for part 1 of this video cut off at 15 minutes, so we're just going to keep going from where we left off. So we've gotten through 2 of the final 5 suggestions for slide presentations. The next one I wanted to talk about was it's important that you include a guide showing where you are in your presentation. So going back to when I was talking about having a good outline, knowing how many people are talking and how much time they're each going to talk for, as well as how many points there will be, is very important. And you can show this through tabs on your presentation slides so that people know where roughly you're going with what you're going to say. Also, it's important to have a backup plan. If, for example, you were to give this presentation at school and you misplaced your USB, would you be able to find a digital copy of it through your inbox? What if the projector stopped working or the clicker wasn't working? Do you have a backup plan? Do you have handouts to give your classmates? Would you be comfortable with chalk talk or marker talk? And by that, I mean writing and drawing things on the board to help your classmates understand what you're talking about. It's important to consider. It's also important to be prepared for questions. You can include images and text on additional slides if you predict that people will be asking certain questions. For example, maybe you want to throw up a map or chart from StatsCan or something like that. So having your slides prepared and having your answers prepared are very important. Okay, so that's it for that presentation. But since I had a second PowerPoint ready to go, we're just going to jump into this one as well. All right, presentation skills. Moving on, we are going to speak our minds even when our voices shake. All right, and a little quote for you there. So why exactly are we talking about presentation skills in an English class? This is supposed to be for you and your benefit beyond just English 1006. You're going to end up giving presentations at work. You're going to have presentations to give in other classes and in the future programs after you finish pre-health. So those skills are valuable not just within an academic setting, but for job interviews. Many job interviews consist of panel interviews where you're sitting with 6 or more people sometimes, and it's a skill that takes practicing to make eye contact with each person at the table, answer each of their questions, and make each of them feel like you're paying attention to them. So this is an opportunity for you to practice that as well. Patient care is important. You might end up finding yourself in a situation where you have to deliver bad news to a patient, and knowing how to talk to them is a skill that takes developing. Also, communicating with support systems, your colleagues, other coworkers, and reporting to your superiors. Regardless of what career you end up in after this, you will end up having departmental meetings where you'll have to speak on behalf of your team, and everyone gets a little bit of stage fright. So presentation skills are things that we have to develop. All right. When we are working on a presentation, we're looking at a 3-step plan. So the first one, plan, you want to think about what information you're going to include, who your audience is, and what medium you're using. So by that I mean you have an idea of what information from the journal articles you plan on summarizing, and I'm asking you to narrow it down to the most important or the most interesting facts so that you can fit it in your 3 to 4 minute time slot. You need to think about your audience. Your audience includes me, and also your classmates. So make sure you're using vocabulary and language appropriate to your audience. And also plan for the medium that you are using. If you know it's going to be a PowerPoint presentation, then make sure that the way you're organizing it or structuring it is appropriate for PowerPoint. Also, when we look at writing, we're going to adapt to the context. So thinking about, again, who your audience is. The audience will influence your context. So are you talking to children? Are you talking to college students? Are you talking to a room full of doctors? Who your audience is really going to dictate how you present your information. The context also now for us includes being online. So you're presenting through a screen, through a webcam. So you're not going to have to worry too much about body language and the other types of gestures that naturally occur in a presentation in front of a room full of people. Next, you're going to write the outline. So again, structuring what information you plan on including and what comes first, what comes in the middle, and what happens at the end. Then it comes time to actually complete it. So you've finished writing it. Now it's time to practice it, revise, review, and relax. So what does that look like? By practice, I mean the texts that you're summarizing are fairly wordy academic journal articles. So a lot of the words you're seeing on the page, maybe you've only ever encountered them on a page and you've never had to pronounce them before. Are you sure you know how to pronounce all of the words that you plan on using in your presentation? It sounds silly, but again, written and oral presentations are not the same thing. So once you've practiced your presentation all the way through, you'll find the hiccups, you'll find the errors and things you want to work out before you do this in front of an audience for marks, right? So now you have time to revise, try practicing it again, then review it. And if you do those first 3 steps, practice, revise, and review, then it is possible for you to relax when it comes time to actually presenting. Okay, the planned step, information gathering. So it's important to think about what you know when you are thinking about how much information you are able to find just in the journal articles alone. That's great, but think about what you don't know. You might find that the journal articles alone, summarizing those, does not provide enough context or information, basic facts even, for your audience to really get at what you're trying to say. So you might need to find extra sources. Think about what you don't know so that you can fill in the gaps. Where are you going to get more information from? What sorts of websites are appropriate? Again, I want you to avoid using Wikipedia or any online sources where anyone can contribute or edit the content. Try to keep your information to peer-reviewed articles, trustworthy sources, and not biased information sources. It's also important that you think about what your opinions on the topic are. And while I welcome you to talk briefly about your opinions on the topic, I'd encourage you to focus more on expressing the information that you learned from this experience, from all of the reading and writing your annotated bibliography. So think about what your opinions are on the topic and just be aware of any bias that you have yourself. So if you were to introduce your topic, it might be helpful to bring in some fun facts. Here would be some examples if you were to talk about STIs or sexual activity among a particular group of people. So things like this are interesting little ways to begin a presentation before you start summarizing the journal articles you've been reading. All right. So I had briefly mentioned earlier the context. So when we're talking about assessing your audience, these are all factors that you should consider. So again, if you were to give a presentation on your topic to a room full of 10-year-olds, it would sound quite different from if you were to sit down with your parents and convey this information to them. So age is a factor. Culture is also a factor. And in our class, we have a mix of domestic and international students. So even though we are all reading from the Cambrian Library database, the way that you present the information might be different depending on what cultural perspective you're coming from. So keep that in mind, and that your audience might not have the same culture as you, so there might be a few extra things you need to explain. Same goes for geography. If you're listing city names, you might need to also include the province or state and country name as well, because it might not be obvious to everyone in the audience. Your interests and concerns and the interests and concerns of your audience might not be the same thing, so keep that in mind. You want your audience to be engaged and not feel threatened or uncomfortable, feeling that you're biased against their opinion, for example. And what about the collective mood of the audience? Your teachers are aware and thinking about the mood of a class when we first walk in the room, we kind of assess, okay, are we in a good mood? Are we stressed? Are we feeling anxious? And that sort of changes the flow of the way a presentation or class might run. So these are things to keep in mind. When it comes time to writing, the situational information is important. So think about the space or room where you are presenting. In this case, you'll be presenting through your webcam, so make sure that the space around you is set up in a way that's conducive to presenting online. The size of the crowd, well, for now, the size of the crowd will be about 3 to 4 people, including your group members and me. But if you were presenting in a room of 40 people, you wouldn't actually be able to make eye contact effectively with everyone in the room. So that's going to impact your body language. How long is the talk? If you're planning a 10-minute presentation versus an hour-long presentation, that will impact how many slides you have, how many images you can realistically display and discuss in that time frame. What time of day are we looking at? How interactive is your presentation? Are you going to include some sort of survey or little warm-up activity? Not necessary, especially in our contexts this semester, but something to keep in mind. Again, these suggestions don't just apply to the annotated bibliography presentation, but should be applied to any presentation you have to give at Cambrian. What resources will you have available when you are presenting? For example, we'll be screen sharing through Zoom when you give your presentation in my class, but after this semester, what does the room that you're presenting in include? Do you have a computer and a projector? Are you using charts, graphs? Are you using board work? Make sure that the room is set up in a way that you can present the way you plan to. And of course, give yourself time to prepare. While your annotated bibliography is technically due to be submitted after you present, please make sure that you have enough time to prepare as a group before you present, which does mean that for the most part, your summaries will be finished or very close to finished before you present. Otherwise, you won't know what you're talking about in your presentation. As you're outlining your presentation, define the main ideas and concepts in your introduction. Even though your group members are reading about slightly different articles than you, there should be an overarching theme tying them all together. So make sure that overall theme is announced at the beginning of the presentation. List the major points or areas of focus that you plan on talking about. And as you are transitioning between topics, point out the fact that you're changing topics or talking about a new article. Source your evidence. You should be mentioning which article or the author's name when you're giving a fact. You can do this easily in your PowerPoint by putting the author's last name followed by the year of publication in parentheses. And as you're outlining and including your conclusion in your outline, you should be restating the main message. Just like when you're writing a research paper, you have your thesis statement in your introduction paragraph, and you restate the thesis statement in your conclusion paragraph. The structure of a good presentation follows the same pattern. When you are including evidence in the information portion of your presentation, these are a couple of options that you have. I would advise you to use a variety of these and instead of just leaning too much into one of them. So you can include some anecdotes if you like. Again, by anecdotes, I don't want you to rely too heavily on your own personal anecdotes, but things that you've been reading about, okay? Unless you have a lot of personal experience with the topic. You can include some quotations, but again, I don't want you to use full sentences and paragraphs in your slides because people will just end up reading that instead of listening to you. So keep your quotations short if you choose to do that. If there are any sort of fun gimmicks or facts, kind of like the introduction facts at the beginning of a presentation, that can help. And counter evidence. If you're feeling really confident in your topic, then you might provide some counter evidence. So evidence that goes against the majority of the points that you encountered and researched, so differing opinions, that sort of thing. And addressing counter evidence really shows that you are open-minded and have considered several opinions and perspectives instead of just completely believing one perspective as presented in a journal article. All right, so as you are introducing your topic, you should be explaining the theme or the thesis. You want to hook your audience and get their attention, which can be done with anecdotes or fun facts, and make sure that you're speaking to your audience. You should not be sounding like a robot. It should very much feel like you're talking to people, having a conversation with them. And by that, I mean your body language needs to include that as well. So you should be engaging. There should be some sort of interaction. And even through a webcam, you can demonstrate that by looking at the camera. You should be showing us what you know instead of just telling us. And by showing, you can do that with gesturing, pointing to things on the screen, and your tone of voice does a lot of that too. Your conclusion. You're going to restate your main topic, summarize those main points, even if it's just reminding the audience of what the 3 or 4 people in your group were focusing on, and suggest some sort of activity or motion to move forward with the knowledge that your audience just got from listening to your presentation. Your tone, very important in your presentation. It can influence the mood of people listening, right? If you're speaking in a very calm manner, then your audience will also feel calm. If you're really excited and enthusiastic, your audience will feel a little bit more energized. How loud you speak is also important. Again, for our purposes, it really depends on what microphone you're using. But in class, speaking loud enough for everyone in the room to hear is very important. The rate of speech is important, which I get it. You might be so excited to express all of this information that you've read about, but if you don't practice within the time constraints that we have for the presentation, you might find yourself needing to speak really fast to get through all of your content before the time is up. So make sure you're practicing ahead of time. If you're a nervous speaker, do you speak faster when you're nervous? Do you speak slower when you're nervous? These are things that you need to know about yourself in order to effectively prepare for a presentation. And emphasis. Make sure you're emphasizing the most important words in your phrases so that it can help people understand what you're saying. Your appearance. Okay. Again, slightly different when you're presenting through webcam, but eye contact and facial expression is important whether you are face-to-face or virtual presenting, okay? So your facial expressions are still visible to the people watching your presentation. When we present, we will toggle between webcam and screen sharing, so I will still be able to see your face while you're talking. And your gestures and posture are important, so not slouching in a chair. You should still be sort of gesturing towards the screen, and body orientation, again, facing the camera. All right. Here are some techniques that you can use to help you practice and feel more relaxed. Okay, so memorize the first sentence and the last sentence. Sounds strange, but you don't need to memorize the whole thing. Just the first and last sentence will help calm the nerves enough so that you can kind of more freestyle what you're saying through the middle of it. And by memorizing the last sentence, that's really important because what happens very often is students are nervous and they're just so relieved to be done the presentation that they say, okay, thanks, I'm done. No, that's not a good conclusion. You should have a good concluding sentence and just memorize that. Prepare some extra speaking notes in case you get nervous and speak too fast and run out of things to say before the time is up. Have some backup plans. Practice either in front of a mirror or record yourself or get feedback from your roommates or family members. Dress comfortably. You don't want to be sitting there in jeans that are too tight. You know, we're all probably doing some emotional eating at home. So make sure that you're comfortable in what you're wearing. As you're breathing, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term diaphragm breathing, but diaphragm breathing means you're doing deep breathing and not just moving your shoulders and chest when you breathe, but feeling it lower in your abdominal area. So breathing and using your diaphragm will help you get more air, and you can speak in longer phrases without running out of breath. If you visualize success, this might sound cheesy, but just visualize, I know what I'm talking about. I'm able to get through this presentation. My teacher is friendly. She's not going to judge me if I make a mistake. I'm going to do great. That should help calm the nerves a bit too. And also remember, the presentation's really not about you. Like I said, I'm not going to sit here and judge you if you make a mistake or you stutter or trip over your words, because I do the same thing. And I'm really just trying to get a sense that you read and understood and were able to summarize some journal articles that have been peer-reviewed in a field of study that you are interested in. That's really all this is for, okay? And eye contact. When you make eye contact with your audience, or if you look at the screen and see that your audience is looking back at you at the screen, that should be reassuring. All right. As we think about media for the presentation, what sorts of options are you thinking about? It would be nice if you could include some sort of technology other than PowerPoint, because PowerPoint can get old. So don't feel like you have to be confined to just that option. There are other things you could try. In the classrooms on campus, we have some smart boards. If you're experienced with using those, then make sure you talk to your professors and see if you have permission to use that extra technology. You might want to include some sort of props, depending on what your topic is. You might find some interesting video clips, but I want to warn you, please, if you're going to use any sort of video clips in your presentation, do not use audio. I don't want to hear other people talking about your topic. Okay? You might find a good video clip that visually demonstrates something that's related to your topic, but I don't need to listen to other doctors summarize things. I want to hear my students talking about the topic that they read about instead. And handouts. In a live classroom setting, it might be helpful to bring extra handouts of key points for your classmates. All right, so just a reminder of what we are doing for this semester's presentation, which is worth 10% of your final mark. We are going to have presentations that are between 8 and 10 minutes long. Some of you have already reached out to me and asked, well, now that we're at home, do we have to do group presentations? If you would prefer to work alone, I understand. And I'm sure that I can find enough time to book individual presentations if that's what you would prefer. I'm just sitting at my desk at home anyway, so we're not confined to the 3 hours of class time per week that we normally would be. So there will be a sign-up sheet. I'll put it up next week, and you can pick what time you'd like to present. That said, if you choose to present alone, then your presentation doesn't need to be any longer than 5 minutes. Okay. You need to be fully prepared, and I mentioned this in the part 1 video. I don't want to get a sense that you are reading full paragraphs and sentences off camera. All right? If you have cue cards in front of you, that's fine, but if you have a script of several pages long and you're just reading, then I can't grade you for it as a presentation. Does that make sense? You need to present the information instead of just read it. So please talk, don't read. You do need to have some sort of audio-visual component and engage your peers. So by that, PowerPoint will work. If you feel comfortable trying other forms of technology, then that's fine too. But a simple slideshow of photos, I don't think would be sufficient for what we're looking at here. So it needs to be some sort of academic audiovisual component. You will be marked on the length of your presentation, content, tone, organization, and structure. The grading criteria documents have been up on Moodle for a few weeks, so you can refer back to those in in the instructions, and you can see specifically how many marks each section is worth. And please be creative. I know a lot of your other courses don't necessarily give you the opportunity to do that. I don't know how creative exactly you can be in a bio or chem lab, but for presentations, feel free to be creative. All right, so we will stop there, and I will talk to you soon.